I got a handlebar in my ear. When does that ever happen? All right, folks, welcome back. Video 6 on getting this sucker back running condition and running well. As you can see, it's already reassembled, but in this video, what we're gonna do is cover some work on the deck of the block itself, you know, the crankcase block, getting the cylinder block installed, covering some piston ring stuff, piston clip stuff, and then getting that installed. I'm going to do one piston on camera. We'll get the cylinder block installed on camera because I have had questions about that from the XS11 video. For example, I wanted to show that. I haven't had an opportunity in another video to do that. The cylinder head and all that cam install will be done off camera because you saw it on disassembly. I explained all that anyway. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So let's go ahead and get right to it. Let's put her in a position where you can work. I'll get you set up and then kind of go over the game plan here really quick. Get it up. Yeah. Okay, that's nice and hard. I mean high. So we're good here. Boing. I'm just getting over this crud. I'm telling you, this crud. I think I'm taking so many steroids now. I'm going to start looking like this. Okay, not really. I got to clean up the base gasket surface. At the crankcase here. The rest of it's all done on the jug and the jugs. Yeah, jug. Where's my head? You know where it is. On the cylinder block. And then the head's done, as you know, for the most part. There's one other thing I want to do. It's going to be a separate video. And then we'll get her jugged up, you know, with the pistons on there and new piston clips and stuff. And it's really hard to shoot all that, especially with all the profanity that's going to come squirting out of my pie hole because those clips are such a pain in the butt. So what we're going to do is do, again, most of that off camera. So we'll just bring you back periodically when we make progress. All right, so let's go ahead and get right to it. Really all this entails is scraping this gently. You know, it's going to come out pretty easy because this isn't like cement. But I got to clean out all these little detail areas. It's going to take time, probably a couple hours to get this part done. Try to keep the oil out of the oil gallery holes down in there, and then just get it prepped for doing the rest of it, which, like I said, is putting the pistons back on. That's what it is. My brain is still fogged out. Too many meds. I probably need to mic these up, and I'll do that off camera just to make sure that they're within spec. But if these things were totally trashed, then we'd stop right here and pull the engine out and have to split the case and do the whole thing, which would really suck. We're going to just go ahead and clean this up. Like I said, and I'll come back when that's done. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do next, and then I'll do that, and we'll move on and on and on. And that's kind of how this video is going to go, because my voice isn't 100% anyway, so you can probably tell, so it's probably better off that I do it that way anyway. Okay, so here's where we're at. It's pretty cleaned up. Looks good, is good, feels good. So I'll cover a couple things about this. Number one, there's really no good way to do it on these crankcases where the base gasket goes, where the cylinder block sits. A lot of times this stuff's stuck on, you know, like cement. And you have to start with the least aggressive to the most aggressive to see if you can get it off. That way it prevents, you know, excessive damage. I have never found a good way to do it, to get the really heavy stuff off, except very careful but aggressive scraping with something. So in this case, I didn't have to do that. In this case, it went pretty well. All I did with this one, take some WD-40 and a Scotch-Brite, and I got 99% of it off. There was a couple of spots that were thicker, and I had to kind of get a little bit more aggressive with it. So a plastic scraper is not going to work. So I use a piece of copper, which is an old Cometic copper head gasket, which coincidentally is from an old KZ1000. And just cut an edge and, you know, use a little sandpaper to dull it down. Because, you know, you can dig into the aluminum with this if you really tried. But it is a hell of a lot softer than a carbide scraper or a razor blade. So then you can just scrape the heavier stuff down. You won't get it all off, but you'll break it down to the point where it'll come off with that and some WD-40. And that's exactly what I did. Usually, I will go back over these, and I did a little on this one with a setup like this, which is just a precision, sort of precision flat bar, which is a old dial indicator extension, Starrett, and in this case 2000 grit with WD-40, just to make sure it's flat. and take off any possible high spots. And what that does also is it gets any of the little remnants off, like little specks of it. And it doesn't damage the surface. 2000 grit's very fine, so you really don't have a problem with it. You will see some witness marks from no matter what you use, but the point is not to gouge it or make any deep scratches where you can have leaks. So yeah, that's where we're at. Now, I'll tell you what else I did. I did pull the cam chain up, and I stretched it out across the top here. I used a couple of bungees, and then measured 20 links, which is what the book says to do. And then, counted 20 links, I should say. Measured between them. The measurement when converted into imperial is 5 inches exact for those 20 links. So I'm pretty good about reading these, between the lines, so to speak. I'd say maybe it's 5 inches and maybe 20 thou. The standard's about 74 thou, so a little over a 16th. It was most definitely not to a 16th over, but it was certainly longer than 5 inches by only a little bit. So we're good where we're going to be right now for the cylinder head, the crankcase side rather, of where the cylinder block goes. And all these little areas, you got to kind of pick out the little shit and then flush it out with some brake clean, blow it out. And speaking of blow, what I use before blowing is I have this hand vac. It's air powered pneumatic, and this works really well for pulling the little chunks up. And I do that as I go. That way I don't have a buildup of it and potentially knock it into the cam chain tunnel or something, or into the oil gallery or whatever. So then once I'm done, I make sure I clean out these little areas, and then, like I said, blow it out, wipe it off, and so forth. I was a little concerned about that guy here between 3 and 4, which is one of the studs. Seems to be awfully high. It's like not screwed in all the way, but it's not loose. And it has to be the way it was put in at the factory. There's just no other way around it. It's not loose. So we're going to leave that. So yeah, so the next step is probably invent some new cuss words and get real potty mouth, and we'll put these pistons in with the new spring clips, which is always fun, not. And of course, we're going to start at the center and work our way out. That way we don't put a piston in the way to get inside here. So it's just kind of, order of operations. What you do is with the pistons is, since the arrow is pointing forward, it'd be the left side of that piston. We'll put the clip in over on the bench. That way we can shove the piston pin in over here and be working over here. We don't want to be working in here to put a clip in. They're difficult, so we don't want to make it more difficult. Anyway, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and get the pistons installed now, and put a little assembly lube on everything, because I've done all the checks on the pistons, inspections and documentation, from ring end gap to side clearance of the rings to the piston grooves themselves, and so forth. So we're ready to move on and do this. Here's number 1 piston, and you can tell it's number 1 by the way it is. And the service manual wants you to put the expander for the oil control centered, in line rather, with the arrow pointing forward. This particular ring manufacturer puts a little dab of red paint and green paint on the very ends of the expander, so it's kind of hard to screw up. And I've never seen that before. That's really nice, because that's usually extremely hard to see. And then they want you to offset the openings for the oil control rings themselves at about 30 degrees off to each side in the front. I got to adjust these obviously a little bit, but yeah, I want to show you that. That's pretty cool. The rings I'm using are standard, as you knew, NPR or Nippon Piston Ring Company, made in Japan. And like I said, they're nice rings. I mean, I was really surprised the quality of these things here. You can see the color a little bit in this one. This is for number 4. It's the one I mentioned I haven't put onto the piston yet, because just haven't got to it yet. But I think what we'll do is we'll just get number 1 going here and show you how to do that. I mean, there's not much to it, but you got to essentially wrestle that clip in. And like I said, it isn't really too terribly hard on these particular pistons, and they are OEM clips, by the way. I replaced the clips with original equipment clips. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, those are OEM clips, if I remember correctly, that I did get for them. because yes, Z1 Enterprises didn't have the clips for the J motor. They had the clips for the 900, the 1000, the 11, not the 1100, 900, 1000, 750. Did not have the clips identified by year, make, and model for you know, this particular engine. So I ended up ordering clips from Partzilla. Now, obviously, I need 8 clips, you know, 4 times 2, and I always order extra because, again, if one goes ding, I don't want to spend all day looking for it. I just ordered 10 clips, and I'll just keep the others for something in the future. Who knows, you know? Maybe make some costume jewelry out of them. So there's your clip, there's your opening. Face it down. Now, it's probably bullshit, but the way I read it was, and I've heard this many times over the years, is when you have the sudden acceleration, or rapid acceleration, I should say, of a power stroke, where it's pushing down, of course. The piston is pushing the clip with it, of course, because it's attached to it. But if you, let's say you had this clip upside down this way, theoretically, if you had enough of an accelerating force, just the inertia against this clip could technically squeeze it in a little bit and perhaps dislodge it. That's what I've always heard.
That's the way I heard
it. And read. Like I said, it could be BS. So we put it this way. So now granted, it could potentially do the same thing and close it and pop it out, but it's highly unlikely to do that. The other reason is, of course, you have, this is your little relief in here for both removal, and it helps in installation too. So we're going to start it on this side, away from that little relief. Try to get it to where the part's down. Let me get you up a little bit. Let me get you up. Like I said, we just work it in. Work it. Now when I put these in, you got to clear the top of the clip to that radius on the top side. In other words, get about 50% of the clip in. So you kind of do that with your fingers. Push it in. Once you get it past that point, it's almost there. See, right now we're in the groove and we're past that point. So now I'm just going to go ahead and take this guy and I'm going to push it the rest of the way. And now it's just popped in, but it ain't in all the way. So we got to make sure that this thing goes up all the way, which it isn't yet, and see if we can get this thing to go a little bit more. And there it goes. And then really zoom up on this one. And then when you're almost there, you push it in and it snaps in. And you got to push this around that groove to 100% make sure that that clip is in the groove. All right? That would be very, very bad if it wasn't. So these are not that bad to do.
That's bullshit.
So now we've got 3 of the 4 pistons done. I'll get the rings installed on number 4 piston. Those are the ones I just showed you. And then we can prep to put the jug on. I'm going to bring you back when we are ready to slide the, actually might even have the cylinder block in place, hung up on maybe these taller center ones. And then I'll have the piston ring compressors that I use installed. And then we're going to go ahead and put these down. I like to do this opposite, or not opposite, but different from what the service manual shows. Service manual shows all 4 pistons at the same level and a special rig that they have, special tool that not only keeps them from flopping around, in other words, doing this while you're trying to install them, but it appears it also keeps the connecting rods from wanting to push it off to one side or the other. It almost looks like a part of a grill, like if you look in the book, you see it. The factory manual, not the climber, a piece of crap. So I have a different way of doing it, but I'm going to do it with the 2 middle pistons. We're going to come down first, so it'll be 2 and 3. And then we're going to carefully bar the motor over, dragging the entire cylinder block down a little bit until we get these guys just about lined up. And then we're going to send it home and then get the thing down, and then that'll be it. And we can move on from there. So that's how I do it, but I'll show you that when we get to it. All right, folks, next day, 0730. I've been working on this about an hour or so. I'm getting it set up to put the jug on. As I said in the previous clips, I'm going to do 2 and 3 first and then bar it over, bringing the cylinder jug down with 2 and 3 and get lined up for 1 and 4. This is how I usually do it. Works pretty good. And sometimes takes 2 tries because what I use for spring compressors, or what you can see there, is hose clamps. And this is where the piece of junk climber manual and I agree on. They actually show that in there. Whereas I said before, the OEM manual shows this very extravagant special tool rig, which puts all the pistons at the same height and slams them down, and they have the individual piston spring compressors. I do have sets of those. Trouble is, on these guys would stick so down, so far down below here and go inside the block like pretty much all of them do. If you have all the pistons even, there's no room for that compressor. I mean, the compressor is about yay wide. And so even if you do it this way, when you get the cylinder block down, let's say you did the first 2 like I'm doing here with the cylinders, with the piston ring compressors, the clamp-on kinds, okay? If you use those, then you can get 2 and 3 on fine. Then you bring it down because you got to bring number 1 and 4 up. This brings the whole block down, otherwise it'd pull out of the bores, and then you don't have room for those compressors around here. So I don't know what the OEM ones, special tool compressors, really look like, but I'm sure they're similar. They just don't work for me. So I've got 4 hose clamps. These are very fiddly. They have to be installed just, and I mean just below the top ring. You can see the top ring sneaking up there saying hello. And you don't snug them up too hard. Sometimes you got to adjust those as you go, but I don't do a lot of these, I do them occasionally, so it's not like I have a lot of muscle memory on it, but not usually, I am successful eventually when I get them in. So I do have a new press block here, if you will, for the mechanism, the hinge mechanism for the rear rub, the adjuster side of the cam chain tensioner. Okay, that's got to make sure that's got to go up through the center, which it's probably going to, maybe, hopefully. Hopes and dreams. And so I ordered that new one because the rubber one that was in there was pretty smushed. And that's pretty important for that to be, at the right height so it gets pushed down. And of course, a new base gasket. I oiled up the cylinders and rings just a little bit. I don't really like it drizzling on a new base gasket. And I have my knock pins in, of course. That would be bad if they weren't. And I'm like, I better put those knock pins in now before I put the, the jug on. So yeah, I got those in. Let me show you what I use for these blocks that are holding 2 and 3 upright so they can't flop around. Okay, let me zoom up on that, show you. These are a PVC material, which is brick molding. If you know what brick molding is, it's a building material. It's a trim material to trim out doors, mainly exterior doors. And you get this over at home store as PVC, not wood. And so I machined a slot in it with a 1/2-inch end mill. And I did this a while back. I've used this on a couple of jobs now. So you have 2 flats basically over the large spans, all right? So that's what we're doing. And I'm gonna get you set up. We'll see if we can not screw it up because I have chipped rings before and had to order new ones, but I was trying to do it differently on that particular one. Like I said, I don't hide from my mistakes. I tell you when I make a mistake, but this procedure usually works pretty well. And then, what you do is you kind of get in here and move it around manually too, whatever you need to do. And if everything's not lined up right, it's not gonna go. So you don't force it. You just kind of wiggle it around and hopefully it'll go without you losing your alignment. And you can also look down the bores and see that your pistons are not necessarily aligned, or they are. This one isn't over on number 3. I'm going to bring it up a little bit and see if we can get that better. That's better. Okay, so 3 is looking good. Like I said, if you look down the bores, you can see an even space around the outside of the piston where it relates to the bore. And that's what you want, because otherwise it ain't going to start. So this is where we're at on this. All right, see what we can do. Get these out of the way now. There it goes. Okay. All right, we got it. And so now we're good there. So that takes care of 2 and 3. So now what we'll do is I'll start to move this down a little bit further. Actually, I don't want to bring it down anymore on the pistons right now because, like I said, I want to take the blocks out, and we'll spin this around, and we may not be able to use the blocks on the other two because it depends on the height, so we may have to just kind of wing it on these here, but yeah, because it's going to bring it down on top of it. I may have actually brought the block down too far, but we're going to go ahead and just run with it and see what happens. Like I said, at least it gets you started, and once you get two in, you know, the other two are a little easier to get usually, so until, you know, it's not, until they're not. Then you got to redo the whole damn thing. There we go. Now we're past the oil ring on that side. I can see it going past the little slots in the what do you call it, the hose clamps. And yeah, I double checked the clocking on these rings. 800 things you got to do at the same time to get these in. I imagine at the factory they don't spend nearly as much time on it. You think? Because they got the right shit for it. Yeah, it looks like this one is definitely down. This side I think is hanging up a little bit. Maybe. Yeah, the piston's just a little cocked and it's got to find its spot. You said cocked. There we go. She went past. It's just got to be straight. Everything's got to be straight. Okay, now we got all four pistons that are absolutely started over the, or I should say, the bores rather, are started over each piston. So all four rings are compressed. The arrows are forward, well, except for that one. No, I'm kidding. Gotta make sure nothing's hung up. We're just gonna go down the rest of the way. That looks good. I'm gonna quadruple check to make sure that that bumper is still good down in there with my flashlight. Yeah, that looks good. I'm gonna send her home. Go home. You know you want to go home. Sit down the knock pins, and there we go. And that looks good. I'm liking it. So, you know, sometimes a little bit hangs up on the very bottom of the piston, like the oil control, but that's why you got that nice bevel on the underside of the bores, you know, where they enter to help kind of guide everything in. So, you know, not like those things are made out of peanut butter. Well, maybe they are, I don't know. But the, yeah, they're not made out of peanut butter, so. Nice. Oh yeah, solid. Metal Gear, solid. The other tensioner goes in afterwards up here, of course. That one just slides down in and goes into this little slot. That one goes there, like I said, so it's not a big deal for that one. All right. What we can do is, if we want, we can, we need to hold the block down by either just holding it by hand, but it's kind of hard to do because you got to keep the cam chain, you know, from jamming up. So I might just find a couple of spacers to put on here on each end, because I'd like to bar this thing over and make sure nothing's binding. It shouldn't be. And then we'll just give it a couple revolutions by hand to make sure that everything's good. So, like I said, if we didn't have to worry about this so much, I'd be more inclined to just do it right now. But I think we're going to try to find something to put as a spacer on here and just put a couple of nuts on top of it and then just hold it in place. I pre-oiled the cylinders, of course, before I put them in. And I already mentioned I did the piston rings too. So we're just going to go ahead and gently move this around. I got a couple of spacers on there with, you know, some just hold it in place. That feels about right. There we go. Yep. Feels about right. It's just a pain in the butt holding this cam chain, you know, so it don't get, it has to rotate with it, and so it won't get jammed up. You know, at least we got some rotations on this, and nothing's bound up. The walls are only a little scored, just kidding. And so I'm gonna wipe the excess oil out because when we get the head on, we'll have to do a comp test on it, and that's gonna skew it. I just want a little film in there. Film at 11. That concludes our sit on it and rotate for the morning. I'll move on to something else. Now, of course, the next operation would be get the cylinder head on, and once we get the head on, we'll put the cams in, and we can do, you know, just double check the clearance, because I have the tool now. I can change those shims in situ, but they should be right. And then once we get the cams timed and you know, the tensioner back in and fully operational, we can actually put this on power, which reminds me the battery is dead as a doornail, so I need to charge it up. And then we'll do a comp test on it before we do anything else. I don't know if I'm going to show you putting the head on. I think I'm just going to bring it back when the head is actually on, because there isn't a whole lot to that. I think the cylinder install is a little bit more interesting, because I've had questions on that, and like after the XS11 job, where guys was like, "Can you show how you exactly put the the cylinder block on?" So I kind of did that in this video, and so you know the head's the head. It's not a big deal. So that's what we're going to do. All right, folks. Here we are. Head's back on, block's back on as you knew, and I got the cams in. Cams are timed. I didn't film any of that. I explained how that's done anyway on the tear down side, so it's not necessarily important here. Plus this video is getting pretty long, so we need to accelerate this. In fact, I may go back and edit the crap out of it, but anyway, I don't want you to miss anything good, you know, like my spectacular fails, which seem to be happening more and more nowadays. Anyway, I've already spun this over, you know, by hand, barring it over, and then under power with the starter. The bateria is, you know, not very good, so I got him on Dad's old charger. Whatever. The battery on Dad's old charger. I'd like to do a comp test on it straight off after doing a fresh top end, so I know it's going to be skewed because I had to put some oil in the cylinders to make everything fit and play nice. And I'd still like to know what it is. So we're gonna, I gotta put you in the stand for this actually, but I'm gonna put you in the stand. As you can see, I did the all the spark plug holes as I promised before. Caps are all torqued down, head's all torqued down, you know, that's all done. So, I mean, we're gonna have to take tensioner out again when we put the head cover on, assuming this doesn't explode when we try to run it. I'm doubting now if this is gonna be in this video, but I'm gonna really try, okay? So let's do number one, ready, and contact. Not bad, 145. I would expect it to be a little higher, but remember the rings ain't broken, they're brand new. Brand new! So it actually may be a little higher skewed on the high side because of the oil in there, but let's see if they all kind of compare. So I'll bring you back when I got number two geared up. Okay, number two. Contact! Just under 145, so real close, which is what I would hope to see. All right, number three, contact. All right, I turned the charger up to 10 because 10 amps because it's not spinning that fast. So I'm gonna have to redo 1 and 2, but we see we got 150, so it's basically the same. Last but not least, number four, contact. Yeah, we're getting some oil puffs out the exhaust, open exhaust, which I would expect because there's a bunch of oil in there, but roughly the same, 150. Okay, folks. What we have here is pretty much the same across the board, as I said. I redid 1 and 2 because now it's spinning a little quicker, hooked up to Dad's old charger. And I got 150 on 1, 145 on 2, and 150 on 3 and 4. So well within a 15% variance, but this isn't an accurate test anyway because there's oil in there. It's just a reference test. So again, the reason why I do this is you do it straight off, because if you got like 110 or 120 on one cylinder and the rest are 150, then you know you got a red flag, so you got to come apart again. But since we're within 5 psi on all these right now, even with a little bit of oil in each one, and it's kind of evening it out. And there may be a little less oil in number 2 than the others. I don't know. You know, that's that gives us a good reference. So we kind of know that we're going to be all right there. At least try to start it. So I was going to go into some words about the carbs. I really didn't want to put them in yet right now, but I'll wait till another time because we need to get this going. But in summary, a viewer sent in something in regards to replacing the plungers, the rubber and the choke plungers, to make sure those things are sealing. I'm still waiting on some material, So I'll eventually do that and probably crank out another video separate on that. But so for now, in the interest of brevity and kind of getting this together, I'm going to go ahead and turn you off. It's going to take me a couple hours to do all this stuff most likely. And we're going to go ahead and get the head cover on appropriately using the proper procedure. Get that all, you know, tightened up, and then get the exhaust on. We'll stick some carbs in. Of course, we got to put the coils in after we get all the other crap in, and then we're going to try firing this thing up. So when we come back, that should be where we're at, unless you know, something explodes, like my brain or my backside. I don't know, either one. All right, folks, here we go. I got the vacuum caps. I got the vacuum ports rather capped off. This doesn't need to be capped. It goes up to that EGR dealio. It's, you know, the vacuum goes to it, not from it. I'll tell you right now, if this fires off, it's going to be like mosquito control in here, okay? So we'll just have to see. All right. How to destroy a formerly active and retired, perfectly good police bike in 3, 2, 1. All right, let's go ahead and put the synchronizer on. Hey, you know, it didn't smoke as much as I thought it would. I thought this thing would be freaking mosquito control in here. So yeah, but it'll start smoking now when all the shit burns off the exhaust and everything, you know, because I use grease to put the donuts in there and hold them in place. So that'll burn off here in a little bit. It'll be smoking, but it's not smoking anywhere near I thought it would. So I'm going to go ahead and get the synchronizer on. We'll see where it's at. All right, let me think about it a second. I'm not sure why we just don't have a good intake pulse on this thing. We should be pulling some serious, you know, intake right now. Whoops, keep kicking you. I don't mean to kick you. Well, I think it's time for one of our fireside chats. And the fire that I'm referencing is going to be this bike when I lighted a blaze here.
The motorcycle caught fire. Look at that, it was destroyed.
Because I just about had it. Not really. Okay, so here's the problem. I cut the video and editing down as far as the attempts to start it because we haven't made any progress at all. It still runs like crap. It just will not run right. So I can't say that the top end job was a waste because we found a lot of problems in there that was, you know, corrected. Valves, the valve guide seals, stem seals, whatever you want to call them. And, you know, it was burning oil, so it's not now. I mean, it doesn't smoke, but it's definitely running lean at an idle. That's one thing. But I also had some fuel in the air box again, which I don't quite understand because I've done a service fuel level on these carbs about half dozen times. Now I got to do it again. And it's dropping a cylinder at idle. And it just doesn't ramp up, and it just seems to be running lean. So I watched the engine temperature pretty carefully yesterday. It never got really much over 200, which, you know, is about right. And, you know, with the laser temperature doodad. And I even went back and did another compression test because I'm thinking, shit, did I wipe something out? And I got 150 PSI solid all the way across, all 4 cylinders. I mean, dead solid with the carbs off. Took the carbs back off, which you'll see here in a second. And like I said, solid. I got no intake impulse on the carb tune. I mean, 0. It doesn't budge the thing. There's a ginormous, got to be a huge intake vacuum leak somewhere, and it's just absolutely mind-boggling. I cannot wrap my head around it, sort of. I may have a theory here, but we'll get to that here in a second. I'm going to show you on the carbs. But so yeah, the situation is not really improved. I'm not sad about doing all that work because, you know, it's fun, it's good content, but and it wasn't terribly expensive. And I wanted to do it anyway. Doing the top end in-house was kind of fun. Not that I would want to do another one, but now I got the tools in case I need to. And like I said, I got 150 PSI across the board. No problem. I mean, boom, right up. And it was done, I did it when it was warm. So that's really a more accurate test anyway. So it's been running for a while, burned any oil out that I had inside there from the assembly lube and so forth. So that's an accurate compression test. As you can saw from the startup clips, I said it's going to be like mosquito control in here, like barely smoked at all. I was very surprised. But anyway, so where this leads us is, again, I took the carbs back off, and it's got to be carburetor. It has got to be carburetor. And you know, I think we're just gonna have to scrap this rack. There's something going on in this rack. There's a crack or something, or there's cracks in the bodies. I don't know. I just don't know. But like I said, I have a theory that I'm gonna try one more thing. And I kind of alluded to this when I was just about to start it. I said I wanted to discuss a little bit of carb things with you that I didn't really want to put them on right now until I did a few other things, but I don't have materials to do it. So I'm going to explain what that is here, and it might actually be part of the solution. So let's go over to the bench and I'll show you what I got in mind. All right, so here's the rack. This is number 4. We're going to look at number 4 because that's the one I took the slide out of. And we're going to discuss what the theory is. I think in summary that our main problem is going to be in the enrichers here. And a couple of you viewers have pointed that out. And one in particular pointed out that you got to change out the rubbers in there or replace these plungers because they get petrified. And the viewer had asked me if I had checked that. And I did check it, and they seemed pretty pliable to me. So what I've been doing is I've been ramping up to actually do that because these things are like they're like 56 bucks a piece just for the plunger. And, you know, that's a lot of money, I mean, to put into this whole rack of carbs. You know, if I was going to put 200 bucks into a rack of carbs, I'd probably spend, you know, 1,100 and buy a whole damn new rack, you know, of similar or something comparable and just shotgun the whole damn carb, you know, brand new. But, you know, that's a lot of money to put into these things. So what he suggested was, and I have a sample here, this is from a Suzuki. You see, I took the rubber out of it. The tip, just a tip just for a sec, and just kind of heated it up and dug it out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that on these one at a time. You know, have to take them, split the rack again, of course. We'll start with number 1 over here because that'll be kind of a test because that's easier to get out. We'll just pull the rod out and then just take that one and try it. But anyway, what the goal here is to replace the rubber inside here with a piece of Viton. And so what the viewer suggested, I'll try to remember his name here and put it in here. Definitely give him a shout out. But he suggested getting a 7 mil punch, which is what this is, and a 1.5 mil punch, which is what this is. And you punch a hole in the Viton and you make yourself a little plug for it to fill this, you know, spot up again, right there. So we're essentially going to make these look like that, put a new piece in, stick them back in. So here's my theory. The problem here is, of course, when it's running and we've got great compression, we got a good intake pulse, but we're losing it here. We're losing it here on the intake side when you have a butterfly that's mostly closed, like at idle. These are pretty much out of adjustment now because I was kind of screwing with them by ear. But you know, if you have it in a normal position, they're all even. You're going to have a certain amount of resistance, so it's going to be pulling a heavy vacuum in this area right here. This area is going to be the heaviest vacuum, and it's going to be drawing through various circuits, like the slow circuit, to provide a fuel and air mixture for that particular circuit at this throttle setting, which obviously is idle. So this is where the vacuum up here is going to be the highest, but we don't have good vacuum here. Okay, we just don't. It's weak. So where could it be leaking? Well, the only circuit that's connected to this is the enricher circuit. Okay, so what happens is, and it's very hard to show you this way, but if you look here, I'm going to kind of zoom up on it if I can. If you look inside this hole, and I'll get a light to help kind of show you. You see that? I hate these LEDs, but you get the idea. All right, that's better, even though the frame rate's screwing it up. But you see way up inside there, you got a hole that it's, see if I can get it better. Yeah, you can see it, all right? Now remember, that's right attached to the, you know, to this, or I should say connected to the same circuit here, the same area as your vacuum port, all right, where we'd be testing from. So again, highest area of vacuum right here. And where that goes is right there. See this little connector piece goes right up into the enricher. Now that makes sense because that's how it pulls a Venturi effect when the enricher's open, to allow you know, the Venturi effect to control that particular circuit and pull fuel up through the enricher jet, whether you have a removable jet or a fixed jet, like in this particular, these sets of carbs. So what you got here is, if these aren't sealing against that inside surface, there's a potential for it to be leaking. And so where's it going to leak from? Well, it's probably not going to pull through the jet itself and make it rich, because there just isn't enough vacuum to do that. You'd have to have these things open and a good amount of pulse going through there to pull that much fuel up through a small circuit like that. And they do work when you engage the enrichers, there's no question about it. But in the closed position, they're unlikely to pull fuel up through there. There's just not enough vacuum, not enough Venturi effect. But inside here is where that opens up to. When you open this up, all right, to accommodate airflow, because you got to be pulling airflow through one part and mixing it, I should say pulling fuel through one part, because you're pulling fuel essentially up through that jet circuit when you open this up. But you need an air mixture to offset it, and it's not going to come from there because there's no enricher air jet on the back of the carb. So what does it do? It pulls air in through the diaphragm space here, okay? So that's why that opens up there. So that gives us a potential for unmetered air to be leaking into here. And that would be the highest at an intake pulse at idle, all right? So how we prove that out is, I kind of took a, I tried the pressure tester, it didn't work so well. So let's put on the vacuum pump and show you what I mean. Of course, this is all the way closed, and we're going to go ahead and block this off with our thumb, and we can't pull any vacuum hardly on it at all. It just drops right down. Now the vacuum pulse, not technically, but the vacuum pulse would be around, I think, 10, 12, maybe 15 inches of mercury. I'm not sure if it reads in inches of mercury or water on that gauge, but let's just say it's about the same. So we can't even hold that anywhere near it. Of course, if we open the enricher up, you know, it's got nothing at all because it's open. That circuit's open. So we close the enricher again and we try this. And again, I'm holding my thumb tightly over that hole, and we just get nothing. So stands to reason that in this situation, the enrichers are probably bypassing and allowing unmetered air in, not fuel, until they're opened up. That's the theory. It's the only thing I can think of at this point that could be causing this, is the fact that we're kind of leaking through here, and we just proved that out. Now I hooked the pressure tester up to it from my blood pressure cup pressure tester, and blocked this off with this closed and sprayed some soapy water out here. and I get no bubbling. So it's not coming out the shaft or the, this end of it, not coming out this end of it. So it's got to be pulling unmetered air from in here. If I could figure out a way to block that, I just don't have enough hands to do it. I would test that, and if it pulled a vacuum, then we could be 100% sure. But there's just not a whole lot of ways to do it. I need a third hand, so I can't do it. But yeah, so I'm thinking that is most likely the cause. Yeah, what I'm going to do is we're gonna just keep going on this and set it aside, of course. But I gotta wait for the rubber to come in. I ordered the rubber. It came out. It's coming out of the UK, and it's taken forever to get here. And so once I get that, I'm gonna make these little plugs, that go in here for these. I have to split the carb to get rack again and do that, which isn't a big deal. And repair these hopefully, and then retest it. And if it passes that retest, then we'll stick them back on and try it again. This one's getting long enough. I think it's just time to wrap this one up, and we'll just have to go with the 7th video and hopefully get this thing running right. I mean, this is the most challenging carburetor engine tuning situation I've ever experienced. I mean, it's just absolutely throwing me for a loop. I've never had, any carb parts like that. For example, the choke plungers or enricher plungers have such an effect on vacuum leak. But then again, I'm not necessarily used to BS34s, which are a little different setup. And every setup of carb is a little different internally. It may look the same, function the same theoretically, but they're a little different. So I don't know. I mean, it's the only thing I can come up with. I know those plungers are closed on 100%. I'm absolutely sure, because you can push on them. They are dead seated in there, but they are not sealing. Even though the rubber or whatever they're made out of felt pliable when I checked them originally, they can't be seating. It's got to have something to do with it, because it is the place where the highest vacuum exists, right in that opening, and is the place we are not getting good vacuum. Ergo, we are not pulling fuel through the slow circuit effectively. And that's why the damn thing won't idle, and when you crack the throttle, it wants to backfire and just runs like crap. So, I mean, if we increase the slow jet size substantially, we might make an impact on it. But that's not solving the problem. That would be doing a Band-Aid fix or Band-Aid test, really, to see if it would correct it. That would be something that would be kind of a proof of concept as far as what the problem is. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to go right for the root of the problem. Those parts, like I said, are wicked expensive, like $56 a piece for those plungers, OEM. And they're not available aftermarket, at least not for the BS34s. I checked. I've been online for a couple hours today trying to figure this stuff out. Between yesterday and today, I should say. So that's gonna conclude this one. I wish there was a better conclusion, but unfortunately, this part is good. I'm convinced that the top end part is good. No problems with it. I'm still gonna pull the coils out rather, and retorque the head, but I'll probably just take the head cover off and recheck the valve clearance after it runs a little longer, once we get it running right. But that's just, normal stuff that I would do. Otherwise, like I said, I'm real pleased with that. Really good compression, and yeah, no problem with it. So it's got to be the carbs, got to be carburation, it's got to be on that intake side. It's either that or we're going to scrap the carbs and get another rack. And I've been looking for that too. I've been looking for a BS34 rack. If anybody out there's got one, and I haven't already posted a video up that supersedes this one as far as it's running good because my fix was correct, or my theory's correct, let me know. Might want to buy them from you. All right, so if you want to see the next stuff, you know what you need to do. You need to stick around, subscribe, ring the bell, do the whole thing. Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed, but it is what it is. Need to move on. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.